The simple suture is being placed. The needle is always driven at 90 degrees or better to the skin edge. The simple instrument tie is shown in this case. If one places the needle driver between the two suture strands, always rotate the strand with the needle on it towards the free strand and pull in the opposite direction. This will always put down square knots. The tied suture is trimmed with a small tail to prevent unwinding of the suture during healing. The first suture or central suture is placed midway between each end of the long axis of the wound. The second suture is then placed, according to the principles of halving, midway between the central suture and the end of the wound. The third suture is then placed, according to the principles of halving, midway between the second suture and the end of the wound. The remainder of the skin sutures are also placed according to the principles of halving. The horizontal mattress suture is placed much like a simple suture on the first throw. Then a simple suture in the opposite direction for the second throw to get the resultant two throws and a loop across the wound. The edges are then sutured together. In this suture type, there is no free edge of suture crossing the external wound edge margin. Here the skin edge is being grasped for placement of a vertical mattress suture. The first sutures are placed close to the skin edge in the intradermal plane and are used to oppose the epidermal or skin edges. The second throw is placed on a line formed by the first throw, but approximately 4 to 5 millimeters posteriorly, and placed full thickness through the skin. It is then pulled through to take the tension off the epidermal or skin edges. The free suture edges are closed, and one can see the resultant eversion of the skin edges with this suture technique. The skin edge eversion is one of the keys to getting good wound healing without broadening of the scar or producing a hypertrophic scar. The running suture is started by placing a simple suture at the end of the wound and keeping the long end attached to the needle uncut. Subsequently, simple sutures are placed across the wound with care not to lock the suture into the loop of the free end. The constant tension is held on the closure posterior to the next throw by the assistant to prevent loosening of the posterior sutures during the subsequent closure of the rest of the wound. At the end, the final throw is placed but not pulled through entirely. The loop on the second to last throw is utilized as a single strand and tied down to those two loops from the one free end. If one grasps centrally inside the looped two strands, it allows even pull on the suture end for closure. Running sutures can be removed by grasping and snipping each subsequent suture and pulling through. The running locking suture is started the same as the simple running suture, but in this situation the suture and each subsequent suture are brought through the resultant loop of the free end of the suture and the needle end. This results in a lock type suture on one side of the incision. Again, an assistant can hold traction on the free edge of the suture during suture placement to keep sutures that have been previously placed snug and in position. The running locking suture results in better eversion than the running simple baseball suture. At the end of the running locking suture, the knot is tied down to the free loop edge of the previous to the last suture placed. The running intracuticular suture is placed first by bringing the first suture in a line parallel to the apex of the wound into the soft tissue and then out the intradermal layer of the apex of the wound. The first throw is placed entirely in the intradermal layer of the skin just beyond the apex of the wound. The next throw is placed opposite this and slightly overlapping, but not entirely overlapping the first throw. Subsequent throws are placed back and forth across the wound. The last throw is brought out the apex of the opposite end of the wound. The wound is further closed with steri-strip taping. The free edges of the intradermal closure are taped down snugly. Steri-strips are placed across the wound to prevent further tension on this closure during healing. Proper removal of the steri-strips necessitates using an adhesive remover, peeling the steri-strips towards the wound and pulling straight up at a 90-degree angle to the long axis of the wound itself. With the intradermal intracuticular closure, the tape over the ends of the suture are then removed and the suture removed with a gentle, constant pull on one end.